Nazi Party's regime. So one could argue that the invasion of proprietary businesses by SS men during November of '38 is a counterexample, right? Is an argument to say that no, crimes of vandalism should be incorporated into a foundational conception of genocide. I'm not going to argue for or against right now. It's not really relevant. It doesn't really matter. What really does matter is that you have an understanding of the attempt by Lemkin to sort of introduce to the international community this concept, this fledgling concept of genocide. And the two first attempts of introducing this fledgling concept of genocide was at the ICUCL conference of '33, where he introduced and attempted to introduce two international crimes. The first being the crime of barbarism, the second being barbarity, the second being the crime of vandalism. Okay, that should be good. All right, now for Lemkin, it's important that we understand in his terms, right? Not that we give, and I'm not going to get into this, but I'm a Gadamerrian, right? I believe that interpretation isn't exclusive, or primacy isn't given to the author, right? Interpretation is open to everybody. So just because Lemkin defined genocide as such doesn't give his definition any more basis than some competing definition, right? However, in an introduction to genocide, I'm not here to offer critiques or sort of semantics. What we're here to do is just understand the concept fully of what genocide is, and this is why I'm sort of devoting so many videos to the explanation of the idea of genocide. Lemkin has a very interesting take, right, on genocide, and what we'll do in the next few videos is to start to deconstruct, right, the idea of genocide, what he meant by genocide, and specifically what he intended for genocide to mean, right? Now, his intention of the meaning of genocide has drastically changed since its inception. But what did he mean? And then the basic series will be complete at that point. But the idea of genocide as a concept, right? So the idea of genocide. So the idea of genocide as a concept. It is the result of formulation. It is a result of the formulation of the idea, which is important, we'll get to that, the idea of, and this is a quote, destroying human groups. Okay, so this concept, genocide, right? It is a concept, and this concept, as a concept, is the formulation of the idea of destroying human groups, right? Genocide evolves as a concept, right, as an idea, out of a more fundamental, a more base, a more substantial idea of the destruction of human groups, destroying human groups, and that's a quote from Lemkin, right? Lemkin says the destroying or the destruction of what? A human group, right? So this idea of a collective group, right? It's important then to recognize that we are talking about, right? And it's, I can be a little bit annoyed when I read, and I'm not going to put anyone out there, but when I read scholars' information on genocide, and they focus the discussion on destruction of individuals, right? Of this particular individual, or individuals within this area, or this particular localized group of individuals, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with talking about genocide in those terms. But if you want to stay strict to, sort of rigorous to the original concept of genocide as presented by Raphael Lemkin, and obviously in disclosing this lecture, and not disclosing, but in sort of educating all of you pedagogically, it's important that you have an understanding of this seminal concept, right? And the seminal concept, the foundational concept behind the idea of genocide is this idea of destroying human groups, right? In discussing genocide, we're not talking about the destruction of individuals, right? We're not at all talking about the destruction of individuals, with a little caveat, and I'll give you that caveat in a bit. Actually, I might jump ahead and give you that caveat now because it's sort of important. All right, so I'll erase some of this and we'll return to this idea of genocide on the bottom. All right, so what we see is genocide as a concept. Genocide results or is developed from a concept of genocide as a concept is the formulation of the idea of destroying human groups. So we arrive at this idea of genocide, right? If we think of genocide here, G-E-N-O-C-I-D, right? If we have the idea of genocide here, and we're trying to figure out what the foundations of genocide are, then we need to think about all those things, right? Think of it like all those support, right? All those things that support this idea, right? All the things that support the idea of genocide, right? So there are all these things that are foundational, right? So this would be our foundation, right? These are all foundational concepts, right? These are all foundational concepts that support the idea of genocide. It's not to say that any one of these concepts in and of themselves is synonymous with the idea of genocide. For example, it would be false to say that crimes of barbarity is a description of genocide. That's false. It would be false to say that destroying human groups is the definition of genocide. That would be false. It would be false to say that the crime of vandalism is the definition of genocide. That would be false. All three of those ideas collectively, right, working sort of within a nexus, right, across a nexus or sort of a foundation, helps us better understand what we mean by genocide when we say the term genocide. So understanding sort of the historical narrative, and not only the historical narrative, but the ideological development, right, of this idea genocide, how idea morphed from one form into another form until we finally arrived at this idea of genocide, is extremely important for new, interested individuals attempting to learn about genocide, right? It's very important to understand that. So this idea of the destruction of human groups is a foundational concept, right? What I wanted to say specifically before, and how I sort of segued into this, is that the destruction of human groups is important. You cannot talk about the destruction of an individual, right? In genocide, we're not talking about the destruction of an individual. We're talking about the attempted destruction of a group. The only time in genocide, and this is also according to Lemkin, this is not me, right? And this is also sort of logically follows from reason, right? The only time that and there's only one exception, right? The only time that we are talking or interested in the destruction of, or the extermination or the death or the killing, you get what I mean, of an individual in a discussion of genocide is when that individual is destroyed, is killed, because of his or her affiliation with the group, right? So the only time we're interested in the death of an individual in genocide studies is when the death of that individual is in relationship to and directly because of his or her affiliation, right? Group affiliation. So individual death / extermination is only relevant with respect, R-E-S-P, with respect to group. Okay. So individual death extermination is only relevant in genocide scholarship, genocide studies, with respect to group affiliation. This individual is individual is targeted for extermination because he or she is affiliated with the group that we are collectively, as orchestrators, collectively attempting to destroy. Therefore, in order to destroy the group, you don't destroy the group as a whole, right? You destroy the group by destroying individuals within the group. The collective destruction of those individuals results in sort of brute terms, right? This is foundational account, results in brute terms, genocide, the act of genocide, right?